All right, we've got a lot of people piling in. Thanks for joining us today. We're just letting everybody in. We get started here in 20 seconds, I promise. Sorry for the delay. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming and joining us on what I'm sure is a very busy Wednesday. We are presenting to you today, Living Loyalty as a Casino Culture. We've got some great speakers with Chad and myself being your moderators today. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Chad, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Chad Gurman, and Red Circle is proud to be the sponsor of this webinar today. Red Circle is the only full-service native-owned marketing agency that specializes in casinos. Been around for 24 years, worked with over 125 different casinos in all parts of Indian country. And we believe in being the best partner to our clients, so much so that we built our own casino database loyalty software system so that everything that we do can be as data-driven as possible. Also created our own casino stock photo library. It's available to any casino. So Red Circle is proud to be sponsoring. We're located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I've heard that the founder, he's an enrolled member of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. Heard he's a really cool guy, tall, handsome, really funny. And they say that when you hang out with him, he just lights up the room. So that's what I've heard. Thank you, Darren.
No problem. I've experienced it. So all true. So yeah, first time for me co-hosting one of these, but it's going to be really fun between me and Chad. And I want to introduce myself. I am Darren Withers. I'm the owner and head strategist for my company, NB Strategies. I'm not going to go too much into myself because I am not important today. So what do we want to talk to you about? We've got a pretty nice agenda. We've promoted the heck out of this thing. So we're going to do some welcomes and introductions with our hosts. Then we're going to go through it into our content. And we've spent a lot of time with our speakers really running through their stories. And we wanted to make sure that you get access to the very top talent in the industry. And so if you have questions, if you want to ask anything during the presentation, please do not be shy putting things into either the chat or the Q&A window. Either one works. We will make time at the end for you to ask your questions. So pop them in there. We want to hear from you. This is supposed to be interactive. And then, based on our content today, I'm sure you will have a few. Then we're going to talk to you a little bit about, what we have going on in the next week or so, and then maybe future events. But we're going to discuss loyalty as a casino culture and data-driven program design. Chad just got done talking to you about all of their great tools. If you are interested in any of the tools like Recon and Real, talking about agency services, of course, reach out. We will follow up. You will not have any question about how to get in touch with Chad. I promise.
Thank you.
All right, let's get right to introducing our speakers. Carrie Stout-Smith is the GM and COO of Cache Creek Casino Resort, a beautiful property up in Brooks, California. And she's earned those acronyms. And with over 25 years of experience in casino operations, Carrie's held leadership positions at some of California's top properties, including Barona Resort and Casino, Thunder Valley Casino Resort, Morongo Casino and Resort, Agua Caliente Casino and Resorts. And she holds a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration and Marketing from UNR, my hometown. And beyond overseeing a team of more than 2,000 employees, which is hyper relevant to our conversation today. We also have Mr. Eric Barbero. He's a seasoned executive leader with over 2 decades of experience in high-level operations and strategic management within the casino and hospitality industry. As a former U.S. Army Sergeant Barbero, his leadership foundation is built on integrity, discipline, and strategy. Eric's held key executive positions with some of the most renowned casino brands in Nevada, including MGM Resorts, Tropicana, Hard Rock, Station, Casinos. His expertise in casino marketing strategy, operational efficiency, and guest experience positioned him as a dynamic leader in the industry. He's later served as general manager for a prominent casino in California, where he was instrumental in driving revenue growth team development and operational excellence. And, both of our folks, as we made a note in one of our calls, come from the marketing world, and we're seeing a lot more leadership come out of marketing. That said, Chad, why don't you go ahead and kick off our discussion today? We're getting right into redefining loyalty through strategy. You've worked with both of our speakers, and just set us up for what we're talking about.
Well, we're talking about how you take a casino that's made up of all these different people, and as leaders, figure out how to push them all and point them all in the right direction. I think that doing that right is it's just one of those challenges that so few people can master. I know that when I worked at Grand Casino, My Tribe's casino, back in the way back days, when I would ride a dinosaur to work, the leadership team there spent so much time and effort making sure that everybody in the organization had the right amount of learning and culture building and all that sort of stuff. And I know from working with Carrie directly that they've done a wonderful job there at Cache Creek. Carrie, do you want to talk about some of the work that you've done?
Yeah, as you were talking, Chad, and it actually takes me back a little bit to talking about Eric and I both coming from a marketing background. And I'll just pause for a moment because I'm really pleased to be on the podcast today with some people that I just really admire and respect and have a lot of fun working with. Eric being one of those, and Chad, of course, working with you and your team has been fantastic. It really makes me think about one of the things that makes marketers really powerful operators, and that's the fact that we understand the power of storytelling. You've got to really start from a place of, where are we and where are we going? How are we going to get there? That's the persuasion piece of it. And then ultimately you have to be the conductor. You have to orchestrate all of it and ultimately pull that all together. And when you have that background and that experience of doing that with campaigns and initiatives, it's not a difficult leap to take that expertise and apply it across an entire organization. So just something that came to mind as you were talking a little bit. And of course, one of the things that we have in common is a shared love for storytelling.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Carrie. I can't express any better that the shared feeling in being, watching two marketers rise up from, I believe you also were a frontliner as well, and just come through the ranks and see two marketers leading two different organizations, very different organizations, one being a tribal organization, the other being a commercial and charitable gaming. And I think the funny thing is you really start to see the benefit of where marketing mindset comes into play in operations. And I think one thing that we could agree on is that we've really tried to take the operational the marketing mindset of being of shifting loyalty from a marketing mindset to an operational mindset, and really plays well into the business. So I'm excited to be here as well, and I had the privilege of working with Red Circle in California at Chicken Ranch, and so we really saw a lot of benefit working with Chad and the team there, and I'm excited to get diving deep into this conversation.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the plug.
Yeah, and we're juxtaposing both Eric and Carrie today because Eric's in a brand new market, building up everything from the ground. Carrie is established at Cache Creek and a mature market and really competitive. And so we're kind of showing you the two different sides of the coin, even though both of our speakers have been in all facets of everything you can imagine when it comes to property launches or Players Club relaunches. So with that, why don't we jump into a little bit of storytelling? So Carrie, you've this past summer, you were working on a big relaunch for your Players Club and loyalty, and tell us about how that unfolded, especially as it relates to the employees and their role.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to talk about this, and I'm going to do so with the full disclosure that it's part of the Cache Creek story, and it's a story I love telling. But really what makes it most impactful to me is the fact that I didn't write the story. I just get to be the one who talks about the successes of our team. So as you mentioned, we're in a mature market. It continues to grow increasingly competitive. This year in June, we'll celebrate 40 years of operations at Cache Creek, which is just a little bit mind-blowing to me. With that longevity for this property came a lot of status quo at a certain level. There was a lot of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that worked for a very long time. But as the market grew increasingly more competitive and as the gaming landscape became more complex, we really had to revisit the Players Club. And we've been talking about that for a number of years. We made some modest changes coming out of COVID, which was an opportunity for us to pull back on some of the entitlements that existed within the program that really didn't serve the business and really didn't serve the guests, although they may have disagreed at some level with some of the changes that were made. It was part of the beauty of going through that really transformative time that we made some changes, but we hadn't really done all of the legwork that was necessary to analyze the program, what was working, what wasn't working, and where we wanted to take it. We were able to do that last year, and through a series of internal focus groups that were hosted and coordinated by our marketing team led by John Meacham, who I think is listening in on the call today, so I want to make sure he gets a shout out. John was working behind the scenes on actually building the program, but was doing it with periodic check-ins, focus groups, cross-functional teams across the organization, frontline team members, supervisors and managers who were all weighing in on what they liked and didn't like about other loyalty programs, including ours, including other casinos, and including programs outside of gaming. It's really where we started to shift a little bit away from loyalty as a catchphrase and talk about it more as a rewards program. Because there's a fine line between loyalty and how we reward players. We've got players who've been coming here and will stop me on the casino floor and tell me that they've been coming here since day one. And I love that and appreciate that. But I need to be able to reward our players based upon how they play today, not how they played 25, 30, 35 years ago. So all of that work behind the scenes, those focus groups really helped us to reframe and understand where we needed to reward loyalty, where we needed to reward current true status with our players. And from there, we took that into actual training sessions with our Cache Club team, which I can jump into a little bit later, but I want to make sure I leave some space for Eric to talk a little bit about some of what they've been doing with his organization on this front.
It's so important. One thing that stands out to me is how you really just in your story took the information from your teams and really put that into the strategic layer on the leadership side. And that's key. I think to answer Chad's first question, you have, especially in multi-property operations or cross-department, larger properties with larger departments, and you really have to figure out how you align those teams. And it all starts with that strategic vision in the beginning. And that vision, although is just one question that you're asking in the total campaign of a launch, you're really trying to gather, okay, here's what we think we want to do. And then it's going to the frontliners that are seeing the impact every day and the people in the market that understand the market better than we do, especially coming from the West Coast to the East Coast, having to understand how things are different, or even in tribal communities. It's a very different approach to the Vegas Strip where I come from. I agree. It's really just great communication and aligning those visions together to meet a common goal that you're aspiring to.
Yeah, I agree, Eric. And from our standpoint, it was really, how do we accomplish the business objectives, but without losing sight of areas that may cause friction for our employees, areas that, also cause friction for our guests. So we certainly wanted to align around a vision that would ultimately be the most impactful for the business. But we didn't want to lose sight of where we had opportunities for operational efficiencies, making our team's jobs more effortless, and also ultimately making the guest experience more frictionless.
One of the things that the guest always smells spin, and I know we talked about that yesterday. How did you take the information and I'd like, we could share how we did it also, but take that information and make it authentic. What was the key there for you?
Yeah, I tend to be maybe sometimes brutally honest. And that's just my leadership style. I tend to subscribe to sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we had a lot of those conversations behind the scenes about what wasn't working with the existing program. There were just a lot of flaws, right? And one example I would give is that tier status never expired. And therefore that limited our ability to really recognize our guests and give them some perks that we would otherwise like to extend to them. So we had to just talk about that. We had to talk about it first as a team and say, yes, we understand some of our players have been coming here for a very long time. They love us very much. We love them too, but we can't treat them like a top tier player if they're not currently playing to that level, because in doing so, we're then preventing someone who is playing as a top tier player from being able to recognize valuable perks that will help them to want to play here more frequently. So we really just had to kind of talk through those situations and then also give the team speaking points on how they could convey that themselves. That was very much part of the training. We had several different role play scenarios. That training was facilitated by our Players Club team. So they were our best possible evangelists to be able to say, hey, this is what doesn't work in the system. They were telling their peers on property, this is what doesn't work. This is what's painful for us. This is what's painful for the guests. Here's what we're really excited about. And that really prevented us from having to do very much spin at all. I mean, it really just was then about how do we problem solve and fix solutions or provide solutions.
It's so different when you look at a market like ours where, you're coming into a market that really hasn't been established yet. And so rather than asking, hey, what's worked and what hasn't worked, we're trying things, and I think one of the things that we look at is you constantly look at what the comp set is doing and try to, identify best practices and what your past experiences are, or maybe other jurisdictions. And it's not always in free play. It's having to understand where the real value is in the player. And I think that's something that tools like what Chad brings to the platform, with platforms to the operation, really allows us to dive deeper into what does the guest want. We did a survey. I remember this when I was a casino host at MGM. The company had rolled out a huge survey, and they wanted to find out. The goal was finding out from our players what were the top 5 items that they looked for that drove their loyalty and their visitation. And remarkably, number 1 wasn't free play. And you would assume, especially coming up in the host world, that was the leading driver, was free play and promo chips. It's not always free play and promo chips. It's really, and I think to this conversation, loyalty is not just bought. It's the feeling that the player walks away with, and it's the feeling that the perception of the brand that they have for the next time that they return. And I think that's what we try and capture, especially here in New Hampshire when we're opening a brand new property like Lilac Club Casino, which we just opened March 10th. So.
I love what you just said there too about, loyalty isn't something that you buy. If you do, it's not going to be true loyalty, right? It's very much a relational concept, and it has to be earned, and you have to continue to earn it with your team and your players. I think just viewing both of them as, really critical stakeholders in anything that you're doing, whether it's a Players Club relaunch or any other new initiative, it's just important to consider all of those diverse perspectives. And not to assume what moves them, right? Just like that survey with MGM. I love that example.
Well, and as you kind of took a step forward, it's a great segue. In talking about, data-driven loyalty programs, and, maybe, in just kind of talking about and setting this up a little bit, get into the nitty-gritty of what it really takes to create a data-driven loyalty program, launch it, and again, the role that these employees really play and how they can take, a leadership role even in disseminating that information back to the players. Carrie, why don't you start us?
Yeah, so for us, there was a lot of work behind the scenes. I know I mentioned John Meacham, our vice president, working in tandem with our analytics team internally, with an outside consultant as well to help us just really make sure that we were looking at our program with fresh eyes. And starting with the data to really help us understand what moved the guests, what didn't move the guests, where we were going to, stratify the tiers and what benefits we'd be able to provide at each tier, right? That's the science behind the scenes. And I don't want to say it's easy because it certainly isn't. But I think the science piece of it can be a little bit more straightforward. It's how you integrate the feedback from the team, feedback from your guests, where you start to blend the art and the science is really where I think the best and most exciting opportunities are. It's also where things can get a little bit muddy and murky too, right? It's easy to get pulled down into the weeds when you're trying to balance between what the data is telling you and what the actual guest experience is informing. But they're really equally important when it comes to designing a program, because you also just have to take the time to get honest with yourselves about what you can provide to your guests consistently. There may be a desire to extend benefits that really just aren't going to be part of your property's core competencies. And so I think there's a lot of introspection and real talk that has to happen amongst the operators, which is again where those focus sessions, focus groups that we held were so critical to helping us to really define that.
I agree. At the end of the day, I think what we try to determine is what is the, what outlets are you utilizing and where are you getting the best data, right? You're trying to use guest feedback. You're constantly trying to use your team's insights based on how their feedback from their interactions are with the operation. And you use your revenue metrics to fine tune, not guess, but fine tune what works. And it, at the end of the day, if you're watching it, you can measure it. And if you can measure it, you can determine whether it's working or not. And I think it's really just understanding where the perception of the guest is and the value the value perception that you're setting forth. And you see people you see loyalty programs trying to incorporate the same standard that you would find in any other loyalty program. But what we found is that for instance, I'll give you an example of Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe, we had we couldn't compete with the lake. You had this beautiful pool that it didn't matter how big of a pool you had on the property, you were never going to win the battle for the lake. So when we were building our loyalty program, we were looking at how did we incorporate what the guests valued in the market the most, and that was partnerships out on the lake. And so it's the same thing in any market that we continue to look at is what is the benefit of that market and how do we tie that into our operation? And our guests seem to really find some commonality when that's done correctly, and it obviously drives loyalty to the program if we're also serving them in other ways than the typical casino mindset.
Agreed. And as we've kind of talked about these data-driven loyalty programs, where does the data come from? It's typically the employees out on the floor that are listening to the players, and building that type of culture is super important and takes us right into building trust with your employees so that they can be that asset to you, so they can supply you with that type of data. And Eric, maybe you can kick us off on this one, just in your experience and even now in a new market trying to do that from square one. What have you been through? How do you build trust and be transparent with employees and build that culture?
Absolutely. I think this New Hampshire Rochester Lilac Club Casino experience is a great example as to us coming into a brand new market where our industry isn't very prevalent in the city of Rochester. It had never had a casino before. In fact, state of New Hampshire, it just adopted HHR within the last 3 years. And so, trying to find not only the staffing experience and talent pool in the market, but then having to understand the benefit behind driving strong service and strong loyalty programs and driving the culture behind that. You really have to focus on training and developing. And I think that was one of the first things that we identified early on was, before we could even think about opening this property, we have to explain and teach our teams the values that we've come to learn as best practices in other jurisdictions. And that's step one. It's your team explaining why we're doing things, making the decisions that we're doing as an organization. And, somebody may not understand the values that we're trying to implement now and until we opened up and then they saw, oh, I can't tell you how many team members came to me and said, I did not expect this in my first casino role to be the way it is. And I love it, and so what we do is we really try to build the trust by keeping our team informed through communication and really understanding, we don't want to sound like Simon Sinek too much, but understanding the why behind the decisions that we're making and the campaigns that we're deploying.
Eric,
Sorry. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah. So Eric, I would throw an idea at you, and I don't know if it has value for you or not, but when my tribe opened their first casinos, for the first many years, for as long as I worked there, we would have this monthly meeting called Team Success, and the employees were all paid. They would clock in and they would go over to this Team Success building, and then the management would run a PowerPoint once a month for a whole week, a different session at different times, and they would run through all the things happening in the casino, all the new promotional rules, and then also solicit feedback from the employees, all in this sort of room full of 40, 50, 60 people, depending on the shift, depending on the day of the week. And it was just this wonderful place where the management would communicate all of the things that are going on to the staff, and the staff would give feedback to the management because they would ask for it. And it was just a terrific tool. And I know my tribe doesn't do that anymore with our casinos. And I always thought it was such a terrific idea to both make sure that all the staff understood sort of all the things that they needed to understand, but also for the management to collect good on the floor sort of feedback week in and week out.
It's such a great practice and it's something that it's interesting. I saw the same process in my last tribal operation where they had a program where every department had a dedicated frontline team member that would meet on a regular basis. We did it monthly. And be a speaker of that department. And we not only did we want to know what was going on with our internal guests, right, our team members, and the conflicts that they have to deal with every day, not only amongst our team, but amongst the guests and amongst the processes, right? They also were able to share with us some of the hurdles that they went through and operationally that we were able to solve for them. But it was a great opportunity. And to your point, Chad, any leader, I carry with the coffee talks, and that's the key. Is if you could listen and continuously listen and take that feedback and be constructive with that and deploy that feedback in a way that's cost benefit to the company and to your people, it's gonna pay off in dividend.
100%.
Yeah,
Carrie, I cut you off, Carrie. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I think that's the joy of having some really excited and enthusiastic partners here on the podcast today. And I think we all get lit up and excited about communicating with our teams. To me, that's just what takes an organization from good to great. And it takes extra work. It takes extra time, but it is well worth whatever time is invested to have those conversations and just to hear from those frontline team members, what is making their job more difficult than it needs to be, and how could they have more on the job satisfaction, which ultimately would mean that they're going to be happier and smilier and providing even better guest service. And I just go back to, those days when I was a frontline team member and remembering being frustrated by, well, why are we doing this? And why isn't anybody explaining to us why we're doing this? And gosh, it seems harder than it needs to be. And that was really the impetus for me to move up through the ranks, was because I just felt like things could be communicated better and could be talked about, and really could take into consideration those that are actually hands-on doing the work. So I love that it's become, something that we're talking about and really trying to proliferate. And the concept of trust and how important that is in the workplace, I don't think we should gloss over that, because it's the communication that builds the trust, that builds the psychological safety, which is something that, my team has been talking about a lot recently. We were really honored to be recognized as a great place to work. We received the certification this year. It was our first year applying. Just got back from the conference 2 weeks ago. And so my brain is just brimming with, now that we have trust amongst our team, how do we make sure that we really double down and maintain that trust, continue to build that platform based upon the survey results that they shared with us? And I just go back to, I think it's how we continue to problem solve challenges in the workplace and do so openly and transparently, so that we continue to build a place that we all feel good about coming to every day.
Absolutely.
I think that's a trait of a good manager, though, right? Is a good manager recognizes that that's going to take a little bit more work, but it's worth it. And I think that the trait of a not so good manager is someone who's going to hide from that work and maybe hide from that open communication and the risks involved there, but then they don't get to reap all the rewards of that either. So kudos to both of you.
It can definitely be scary, Chad, right? I mean, you have to get comfortable with the discomfort. Our past VP of HR, who retired earlier this year, would often remind me, don't ask a question if you're not prepared to answer that question.
Right.
And that's really key, right? You can't be out there asking all these questions and then not going back and saying, okay, you asked, we heard you, here's what we're doing. Or you asked, this is something we can't change, we can't address, and here's why. But you have to really lean into that. You may get some questions that you're not, or some statements that you're not going to be entirely comfortable with, and how are you going to respond in those situations?
And I think the idea is, I'm not only a leader, I was also an employee. And how did, just to throw this into the mix, how did your past, roles working your way up influence how you lead now and treat employees?
Take that first, Eric.
That's a good
Sure.
question. I'd be happy to take that one. I think one of the hardest things to do is to grow, internally and organically amongst your peers, because there's a separation that has to occur for that followership to happen. And I learned that early on in the military, in the Army, where it's hard to separate that. And I think along my path, not only in the military, but in my civilian career as a hospitalian, I think you see the same thing play out. You see that, I've learned from so many people, and I don't think at any one point I've had a mentor that sat me down and said, okay, today I'm going to be your mentor. I think it was really just an opportunity to learn and witness and experience growth with multiple organizations to identify what worked and what didn't work. And I think one of the strongest tools in my toolbox is that I could always, my team knows, and any team that I've had the privilege of managing knows that if I'm asking you to do something, I have no problem doing it myself. And second, I've probably done it already. And I think that's the value and the tool in the toolbox that's so valuable to me, is being able to show that I've been in your position, and I had leaders in my career that showed me a path. And if not for those leaders, I don't think I'd be where I am today. And I hope that the path that I've blazed is going to allow for other marketers and other hospitality managers and future executives to really understand that if you put your head down and identify what it is you're trying to accomplish, it's possible. You could get there. And when you come into a new market like New Hampshire, and I'll never forget the first address that we had to our brand new team that we just hired on. We were getting ready to open the doors, and we were going through our soft opening. We had an all hands meeting, and just being able to share my story and the feedback that I received from them and the excitement and wanting to lead or follow the leadership and the effort that we're putting forth here. I'll never forget that meeting, and I'll argue to this day that'll be a very memorable moment for me in my career.
I love that path and how your military background really just gave you so much grit and resilience, really equipped you for working in the trenches in hospitality and starting from the ground up. That was very much what it felt like in the early stages of my career. I mean, I started in California tribal gaming before it was entirely legal, which I didn't realize at the time. And, it was a really scrappy time when I think I was really fortunate to work at a learning organization. I started my career at Verona. I spent 13 years there, and they really believed in training as a way to build the talent that they needed at a time when the industry was expanding so rapidly. And maybe didn't quite, maybe they did. I don't know. I don't want to infer, but really the leap for me is that, that investment in me as an employee bred so much more loyalty because I felt like I was really being developed on the job and given opportunities to grow. And that has never really left me. Also, just that sense of being part of a team who maybe we didn't always have the skills or the experience to tackle certain projects, but we had each other and we had a lot of creativity. We had a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And we had a really good team dynamic to be able to experiment and try some things and then iterate and figure out what worked and what didn't work. So, those early experiences of, being in a meeting and saying, hey, revenues are down. We need to craft a new promotion. Okay, great. When do you need it? Next week. Like we don't do that anymore, right? We've got processes, we've got a loop in regulatory. There's a lot of there's more structure today than there was then. But in some ways, that was the exciting part of it because we really just had to wear a lot of different hats and to be creative. And there's something really beautiful about being able to tap into that, but also to meld that to today's more modern standard of doing business in Indian country. Which of course is where my career has been spent.
Well, and I have to say, Carrie, just be spending a small part of my career in California and in tribal gaming, I have to say California leadership behind tribal gaming has really done an amazing job. I don't know that I've had the privilege to be in a market that's as communicative and as strategic as that group. I mean, we sat on a call every month with 40 something GMs of tribal organizations, just discussing. You talk about really getting the buy-in and discussing collaborative ways to not fight with each other in the market, but to work together in a market and really just see some great result from that. And kudos to you and to the rest of the team that keeps that going.
Hey, it's a beautiful thing. And it's nice to know that that's more of a new school approach, right? It used to be that we kept everyone at arm's length and we didn't want to share too much information. But I think, the challenge that we went through with the pandemic really bred this opportunity that if we communicated with each other on best practices, we were going to be able to get our businesses reopened faster and more successfully, more safely for our employees, for our guests. And that has just continued since then with, where can we build bridges? Where do we need to, keep competitors at competitors' arm's length? But there's much more that we have in common, and truly a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's an honor to work with just so many really engaged, passionate, and communicative leaders in California. And we miss having them on those calls.
Yeah.
What a cool thing, by the way. I think that's amazing. And I guess I didn't realize that California was doing that. I was at the Northwest Gaming Conference earlier this year, and I sat in on a session that they do every year, which is a GM and CEO roundtable where all of the operators sit together and talk about their issues. And I thought that was just the coolest thing because that does not happen in Minnesota where I'm from. And yeah, that's great that you guys do that. I'm so impressed.
I think there's more and more organizations that are bringing that to the table. Native Nations also does that with some of their conferences, including their executive exchange. And it really just takes one person to kind of open the door and make that more comfortable and accessible. And all of a sudden it starts to become a new standard. So I'm glad it exists, and I'm hoping it's something that continues for many years to come.
Very cool.
And, you know, taking everything that you've told us here today and engaging employees so that they can be a part of the solutions that you as leaders are putting out there, right? You're like, hey, new players club. Hey, we've got new technology to roll out, you know, and all of these things do the employees just make or break whether you can be successful. And so maybe, you know, starting with Eric, let's talk about Players Club beyond the casino floor and integrating Players Clubs into all facets where the employees touch a guest, whether it's the hotel or Players Club or, you know, front desk. It's everybody, right? So Eric, take us in.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think when you look at driving loyalty, it's more than just a club. And I think this question talks about it. It's not just what the Players Club could do on the casino floor. In fact, when we look at opening up our properties, we look at appeasing every segment of the demographic that we're going to see in visitation. And really, coming from the Vegas market, you have to identify what those are and how competitive you could be in there. Because look at Las Vegas. You look at a property that has another property 30 feet to the right, 30 feet to the left, 30 feet, 45 degrees behind you, in front of you, all kinds of directions. And so really what separates you apart is what the team could do for you and how that experience is derived for not only the internal guest, but the external guest. And I should really say not only the external guest, but the internal guest, right? Because a lot of the focus goes towards the external experience from our guests and not our team members, when rightfully so, if you believe in the profit sharing cost model of, you know, hey, I'm going to treat my team member the best and my team member is going to treat my guests the best, and in return, I'm going to have the best profits because of that. It's really identifying how that team creates that experience. And so, you know, the earlier conversation, loyalty program on the casino floor could potentially buy business, but it's really what we notice in this market is we're not a destination location. We are a regional local property. And so our guest is a guest that's going to come here 200 times a year, and every day they know our team, they know our you know, they know the porters, they don't know just the dealers, they know everybody because they're here every day. And we also find that some guests aren't the gaming guests, some guests are the food and beverage guests, and some guests aren't the gaming guests and not the food and beverage guests, but they're the entertainment guest, right? Or they're the poker player. And so it's really building that experience for that unique targeted customer or guest is really where we find the value in our operation. And for us, it all stems back to listening to the data points that you have and gathering the feedback and identifying what's more important in building that experience. So for us, it's, you know, really what are the amenities that our guests are looking for? What are the partnerships in the market that our guests are looking for? And how can we help cultivate those and employ them in marketing campaigns and our guest experience?
I love that, Eric. This was actually one of the most important components when we were redesigning our program, was to provide a more modern rewards program to our guests that included gaming and non-gaming spend. We're very similar. We're a regional resort. I would say we have a destination feel in Northern California that sets us apart from our competitors, but you have to work a little bit harder to get here. And as part of that, we have a really rich amenity set. We've got beautiful championship golf course, fantastic spa, restaurants, mini mart, and integrating all of those amenities into the rewards program is critical. But we couldn't do it without making sure that the teams behind those amenities were also on board and understood the implications of that. Part of the process that we used to launch the program included that Players Club facilitated training And we were really successful in implementing that training across more than 90% of our workforce. And the proof is in the results. We see that some of our highest engagement is actually those amenities that are out on the fringe of the casino, where it can be so much harder to maintain that connectivity. Our spa loves being able to promote that guests now earn rewards based upon their retail spend in the spa, whether they're purchasing gifts in the spa gift shop or whether they're actually paying for a treatment. They're earning benefits based upon that. And we're seeing some of our highest engagement with them, with the golf course, also with the mini mart, where guests can use their comps to help get a discount on gas, which in California is never a bad thing. And especially with the drive that they have to make to our property, which is a little bit off the beaten path, but well worth it when you get here. So again, just really implementing all of your resort amenities and experiences into the program, but making sure that the team that's going to deliver upon that is engaged and excited about being able to offer those rewards to your guests is really critical.
Agreed. Is that a best places to work plaque behind you?
I don't think so. That's probably,
Oh.
that's got a bunch of things behind me. I need to clean my, I don't have the plaque yet, but I need one.
Darren, can you tell you could tell where we are in our organizations just by our offices. She's been there and she's got herself all situated. I just moved in and I have to put the artwork up still.
Nothing like
Darren,
fluorescent lights.
question for you. When a lot of the amenities that were introduced to Cache Creek, were they the original vision that you had thought, or did the tribe see that, hey, we have an opportunity to bring new amenities into the market? And how confident were you that your guest buy-in behind those new amenities were going to be successful? How did you look at that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think often as operators and working in partnership with our tribal council or casino boards, whatever that structure may be for your property, often there can be a bias to say, I love Mexican food, so I think you should add a Mexican restaurant, right? As opposed to really making sure that you're taking a step back and letting the data inform those decisions, whether it's surveys with your guests, focus groups, other research that you can do to better understand which amenities are going to be the best fit for your property. I inherited this property, although yes, I'm somewhat settled in here with my 7 years of collecting some souvenirs along the way. A lot of the work that the tribe did predates me, and really leaning into our beautiful location, really wanting to be able to provide a resort style experience was part of their vision. But doing so in a way that was in alignment with the demographics of our guests and what they would want to see was critical to that, and making sure that the data informed those decisions along the way. And we'll continue to follow that model as we continue to expand and grow our offerings here on property.
Can I jump in and just emphasize the importance of doing that research and, having the honest conversations with yourself about what is going to work at your location and what isn't? I recently had a conversation with a small property that's not, you guys are both sophisticated operators, but there are lots of tribal operations that don't have people with as much experience as you guys. And I listened to an operator talk about the things that he likes as a player when he plays, and the things that he wants, and the things that he's enjoyed in his career. And there are a bunch of things that did not match what that property was able to offer or would be a good match for them. And so it's really scary to think about the influence this person has and the choices that they want to make, and the danger to that property. His personal opinions and what he wants to do sort of might get in the way of being successful. And so I really think it's important to have those honest conversations and do the research and collect up that data, because You can go down the wrong road and spend a lot of money on stuff that doesn't work. I'm sure we've all seen that too many times.
And to your point, Chad, you really have to be open to, hearing things that you may not want to hear, hearing contrasting points of view. But that's one of the most important roles of a leader, is to be open to that feedback, but then also to say, okay, so that this is my perspective, that's your perspective. How are we going to really determine what's the best path forward for our organization? How do we make sure that it's not just my gut or your gut that's driving those decisions? Let's really fact check and make sure we're doing the right thing for the organization, something that's going to be sustainable over the long term.
Well, you guys just went right in to our final section here, why employee sentiment matters. So Carrie, since you were already kind of diving into the subject, why don't you take it a step further and just talk about, your employees, their satisfaction, things that led to your awards, and really, in a mature property where you're more refining than building like Eric is.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I have the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of those who came before, and most importantly, our tribal leadership and their commitment to our staff, which just shines through in everything that they do. We were recently recording some videos to celebrate our 40th anniversary, and to hear our casino board members and tribal council members, talk with such sincerity and heart about how appreciative they are to our employees. I mean, you just can't replicate that, and you can't train that either. I mean, it's there or it isn't. And it is met tenfold by our employees because they feel that. So some of it is ownership. Absolutely. It absolutely starts from the top down. And then it falls on the shoulders of me and the rest of our leadership team to make sure that we're delivering upon our implied promises, which, Chad and I talk a lot about from an external marketing and advertising standpoint. But the same is true whether it's your internal communications to your team or your external communications to your guests. You just have to be authentic and true to what it is that you're going to do. You have to be open to hearing the feedback from your team. I think if anything gives me some pause, we're having a lot of conversations right now about how to follow up with our team on the survey results from the Great Places to Work certification. I am mindful that just because we are here now doesn't mean that we will stay here. And if anything, it raises the bar on the expectations of our employees to say, okay, well, we said you're a great place to work, but we also said you have some things to work on. So how are you communicating that back to us and sharing with us what the areas of opportunity are, and how we're going to continue working on those as a team? So that's the next step for us, is to make sure that, it's not just one-way communication. It's communication that just continues and iterates over and over and over again. The work is never really done, but that's the beauty of it.
I agree. We really focused on, when we were developing the leadership team and for Granite State Gaming and Hospitality, we had the opportunity to pull leaders from all across the country, and you really tie everybody in with all these different backgrounds and experiences, and you align them into one common goal. And that goal to us was, how do we build this team now, and how do we open these properties? We have the leadership team, and what does that look like? What does this team look like? How do we want to treat a multi property operation with 3 properties planned? And for us, it was really focusing on vulnerable leadership. And what I mean by that, it's not just being vulnerable and sharing, from a leader's perspective, that we're not perfect. We don't have the answers to every problem, but it's really just sharing that to the frontline team members, that they know, hey, you're going to help me just as much as I'm going to help you. And whether that's in data, once you establish that trust and that camaraderie between management and the frontline, it feels like it's so much easier to accomplish and to communicate through these through challenges that we deal with on a daily basis. And when that's established, that trust creates so much positivity, so much positive traction for us, where our teams are no longer fighting the you're working with the people, the processes, and the technology. You're not fighting those things. And so for us, I think that, COVID was a really big learning lesson for a lot of operators. I think we saw the value in showing and making sure that it's visible to our team members that leadership does care. It was a rough thing that we went through, and what we do is not an easy task. Every day we're managing hundreds of people who are dealing with thousands and hundreds of thousands of guests and those challenges. And so working together is the key, and you just have to figure out a way to break through that barrier of management and frontline and get there for that common goal.
And I think that actually kind of brings it to the bottom of the funnel. You guys didn't even need me and Chad, to be honest. You guys were interviewing each other. It's awesome. So we have a little bit of a Q&A. I just want to we have time for one question. I'll just pose this to both of you. How do you manage employees that aren't on board, and don't feel invested or heard? What can you do? Maybe some advice just to close out with for our people on the phone is just, how can we work with those people, or how can we, what can we do?
Yeah, I'll jump in because we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and I've got an example that I love to share that still just brings a smile to my face. We had someone at a previous property I worked at who was a very vocal critic, and it was hurting her upward mobility because she was viewed as being just negative and not being on board and supportive. She interviewed for a position, and the team was not in favor of promoting her because she was viewed as being difficult. And we talked a lot about it and reframed it as someone who was really passionate and cared about the organization, but didn't have all of the tools, didn't understand all of the decisions that were being made because she just hadn't been elevated to a level where she could have that visibility, but really wanted to be part of something bigger and wanted to be part of making our organization better. And after much deliberation, she was promoted to the position, and it was a game changer because once she had that seat at the table, one, she got more visibility to why decisions were being made and what some of the challenges were, which gave her a different perspective. She also became part of the team that was responsible for communicating that back down to the next level of supervisory and management team, which, because of the situation she had come from, she was uniquely qualified to be able to say, okay, now I understand what questions they're asking and also what we can and can't say. And it just, like I said, it was a game changer all the way across the board. It's not true for every employee. It can be a risky proposition, but I think it starts by really trying to assess, why is that person coming across with a negative outlook? And could that be properly harnessed and channeled through, different opportunities?
Well said.
That's
Eric?
a great story. I'll leave with a similar mention is that, I think for us, it's, team members are gonna have struggle. And typically what I find is that struggle is in lack of communication or understanding what the communication was. And so what we've done is, every time we make a decision, we try to forecast what that, 51% are going to say yes, and the 49% that don't understand it or challenge it. We have to forecast what is that going to be, and how do we better explain the reasoning behind this decision. I'll give you a perfect example. We offered a 50% discount to our team members in one of our smaller properties for food and beverage on their lunch. And the pricing of the food down there had been reduced as an amenity to the casino. And so from a cost of goods perspective, we weren't making a lot of money on the food items. It wasn't a big driver for us. However, we had to reduce the discount there because it was destroying the value of the food and beverage operation. So what I found was that when we communicated the reason why we were doing it, it was either raise the prices or reduce the discount. The team was happy with the decision to reduce the discount. And I don't think, we would have expected that had we not communicated and had open forums with our team in explaining that thing. And so once again, I lean back to Carrie's coffee talks or just opening that line of communication to your frontliners and really understanding what their perception is of the direction or the challenges they're facing, and putting yourself in their positions, because we were once there. And that's it. I think it's easy. Carrie, I can't
Well, thanks.
thank you enough for your time on today. It's always a pleasure catching up with you, and Darren, Chad. It was great to be a part of today's conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
I feel the same way. Thanks for having us on. And Eric, it's been great to reconnect. Miss having you on the West Coast, Best Coast, but nice that we can still stay connected across time zones through platforms like this. And I'm so glad you're doing well. And thanks again, Darren and Chad, for having us on today.
Thank you.
And I want to thank my co-host, Chad. Thank you so much for sharing the spotlight today. And we have a webinar coming up next week. If anybody wants to join, you will get an email about it. We are also recording today's presentation, so don't worry, we will send that out shortly after this. And if you want to find Chad at OIGA coming up in July, he will be there along with his team. Maybe I lied and said Chad will be there. Maybe Chad won't be there. We don't know. But either way, Red Circle will be there.
Chad's going to try to be there.
Chad's going to try to be there. And we want to thank everybody for joining us today. We know it's a lot on you to attend something, and it's really important. And we really thank you for your participation. Stay tuned for more. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one.